Next, I'd like to introduce Dan Gibbs, big game biologist for Region 4, to discuss Cumberland Plateau bear DNA.
I'd like to thank the Commission for the opportunity to address you today and give you an update of where we are with some research we've been doing on the Cumberland Plateau regarding black bears. Give me just a second here. There we go. Okay, before I get started, I just want to take just a quick moment to go ahead and just recognize the collaborators that were involved in this project. It took a tremendous amount of manpower and time. We had TWRA officers, biologists, technicians, managers, volunteers, personnel from the Wildlife Division drove up there once a week to help collect as well. The Big South Fork National Recreation Area had personnel involved in collecting this data, as did Pickett State Park. Division of Forestry allowed us to survey on their property that's within the park. And then the University of Tennessee, Knoxville was involved in some of the data analysis, and the University of Kentucky also gave us some input. So a lot of different people and agencies involved in this work. Now I want to mention just real briefly some history. And as Chris said a while ago, you know, bears have been all over Tennessee in the past. Historically, the whole state could have held bears. And Big South Fork, there's been sightings, you know, in the 80s and 90s occasionally up in the plateau. But in 1996 and 97, the park, and when I refer to the park, I'll be talking about Big South Fork. The park was working with the University of Tennessee to supplement their bear population and add a few more. And what they did is they moved primarily females that were either pregnant or had cubs. And they moved 3 females that were pregnant and 5 that had cubs, with a total, I believe it was 13 cubs. And the theory behind this was that these females would stay put, for lack of a better word. They wouldn't pick their cubs up and try to go back to the Smoky Mountains National Park, which is where they were captured. And this theory proved to work pretty well, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I wanted to put a couple of pictures in here to kind of give you an idea of just what it took to get those bears out of the Smoky Mountains. And you can see on the left one of the UT folks climbing up the tree, and then they had to climb down into the tree and dart the bear, get the bear and the cubs out of the tree, and then you see the amount of people that it took to pull these animals out of the woods. So that was 14 years ago. And in 1998, based on what was put up there and what they thought may already be there, an estimate of 38 bears was established. And they also predicted that there was a 76% chance that these animals would be viable and the population would continue to grow. So that was about 14 years ago. What's happened since then, for about 10 years, they moved along, and you start getting more and more reports. And at the time, Scott County was in Region 3. So in Region 4, you know, we were just hearing what we hear from the guys in Region 3 about how the bears are doing. However, over the last 3 to 4 years, those sightings from the general public are certainly increasing, and we're also getting more complaints, which are both going to give you indications that your populations are growing. And also, when you start hearing these types of reports, you also start getting questions from the public, such as, when are we going to be able to hunt these animals? And the answer up to this point has been, we don't know. And so the agency, given the number of sightings that we're having and things that are going on, we decided it's time for us to start taking a look at this bear population and get a feel for what is going on the Big South Fork and the surrounding area. So we started by picking an area. And as you can see right here, that red is a little hard to see, but this is the Big South Fork, Scott State Forest, this is Pickett, and these are some state natural areas that are in and around Pickett. And we didn't choose this area by accident. This is what we would refer to as our core population of bears on the plateau, the heart of the population, if you will. And we'll talk some more about that here in a few minutes. But basically, we divided this area up into 107 sites. Each site was, or the sites included, most of them were in Fentress and Scott, with a handful in Pickett, and I believe it was 2 that we had in Morgan. The size of the grids were 2.58 square miles, and that gave us a total study over 276 square miles and a little over 176,000 acres. I do want to mention that 70 of these sites were on public land and 37 were on private land. So even prior to getting in the field and doing the work, we had to do a lot of groundwork, just contacting landowners and getting permission to set these sites up on their property. And we didn't have anybody say no. Everybody was very receptive to what we were doing, and we're glad to see us up there working. The methodology is pretty simple. What we wanted to do was a basic mark recapture where you set up a snare, and a snare is 2 strands of barbed wire. I think you can see that, around 3 to 4 trees, and the top one is about a little above your knees, and the second one's halfway between your knees and the ground. And then you put a bait and a scent in the center. And the only stipulation on the size of the area where the barbed wire is, you want it large enough that the bear can't reach over and take the bait without going either under, through, or over the wire. And then when it goes through, I think my battery's died on me, it's going to leave, there it is, some hair. And then you can see here these envelopes are where we were checking a site, and we had some hits. The first time the bear shows up within the 8-week period, and this is how long we did this, 8 weeks. So if you had a bear show up at this site, which looks like it was 57, on week 1, that's the first time that bear's been marked. If that same bear shows up a second time at site 60 or 32, or even at this site sometime later, then that's a recapture. And you can take number of bears that are marked once and then look at your recaptures, do a lot of statistical analysis that I can't even begin to explain to you today, and at the end you'll get an estimate. And that's what we were after, was an estimate. So we ran these for 8 weeks, and over that 8-week period, here's what we got. We had 301 total visits. 82 of our sites were visited at least one time, so a 77% visitation rate, and we collected 1,490 samples. And this graph, or this picture here, shows you that the sites and basically how many visits we had at each site. Now, visit could be 1 bear or 2 or 3. We just know that a bear took the bait during that 1-week period. So we got all these hair samples in our hands, and the next thing that you do is you send them to Canada. And we sent them to the Wildlife Genetics International in Canada. And we really wanted to use that lab, and we're glad we were able to. And the reason being is because there's been some other research that's been done in this area, in the Kentucky and Virginia side, and Wildlife Genetics also did their DNA, and that gave us some further information to utilize later on, and I'll mention that in just a minute. Okay, I said we had 1,490 samples. Well, the good news is you don't have to look at every one of them. We pulled a subsample out, and the lab went through 307 samples that were tested at 8 markers, and they sent us back some information which said that they were able to identify 124 individual animals in that area. Of these 124, 60 were male and 64 were female. And we also had 3 recaptures from previous studies, and I mentioned the previous studies just a moment ago. Now, when you send stuff off for DNA, you get real concerned about what you're going to get back, because you start talking to guys that know about DNA, it gets really over your head real fast. And this is one of the charts they sent us, and you know, you kind of look at that and go, it should mean something, but I'm not really sure what it does mean. But I put this up here because it answered a question or I guess it answered an assumption that we were making just in conversation that we really didn't expect to get an answer to, but I want to show you this real quick. What each of these colors represent is a different study, and this color is not coming through real well, but teal color is going to be the Tennessee study, and also in here you have some blue and some yellow. The blue and yellow are other studies that were done on the north end in Kentucky of the Big South Fork. Over here to my left, you have gray and white. These were studies that were done over towards Cumberland Gap National Historic Park, which is going to be eastern Virginia, or eastern Kentucky and western Virginia. And real quickly, what this shows, even though these bears are the same subspecies, there's a definite difference between their DNA. I'm just going to put this down for now, but the bears on the right are different than the bears on the left. And so what this tells us is that there's just one or two white or gray squares over to the right where the bears from the studies around Big South Fork are occurring. So what this tells us is that we're not getting a lot of bears moving from the Pine Mountain area over there in Virginia and Kentucky into this area. So most of our reproduction that we've had has been as a result of the bears that are already there doing very well. Now, Wildlife Genetics, they sent us a number, and the number they sent us was 245. And the first thing that you're going to want to know is what does that mean? That's the estimate. It was about 50% male and 50% female, just like the hard numbers of 124. Well, what 245 means right now is it's a start. Remember, I said that it was the first step in determining what we have up there and what we can do. We don't have any confidence at this time using the number 245 to set a bear season. And it goes back to what I said earlier, is that, well, first of all, let me say we're still going back and forth with UT to make sure we're comfortable with all the methodology that they used to come up with this number of 245. And then the second issue, and really the more important issue, is that this is not representative of the entire plateau. This is representative of 170,000 acres. And I have a couple of slides I want to show you real quick to kind of give you, bring that home. This area to the right, these blue stars are your first capture of your males, and these are your first captures of your females. And even within our study area, you can see that there's areas where there's quite a few bears you utilize in the area, and then you get over in here, and there's not any captures at all. And you see the same thing with females. So even within the study area, they're not evenly distributed. I mentioned Kentucky doing a study. In 2010, they did the entire McCreary County. And you can see on the bottom, I apologize, this thing's not working any better, but the brown on the bottom is the north end of the Big South Fork National Recreation Area, and that to the left is going to be Daniel Boone National Forest. And as you can see, the yellow and the red are the captures they had. So even as you start going north, they're not showing as many bears north as we saw on the south end. So once again, it goes back to where I said we felt like the area that we were looking at was definitely the heart of the population for the plateau. And to bring it out into a little bit larger scale, I believe everybody knows where the plateau is on here. There's my pointer. You're going to be talking about this whole area here, and then right in here are those counties that Chris outlined, and here's the study area. So it's a very small portion. Now, in addition to the fact that this isn't representative of the entire plateau, we also have some other biological issues that we want to consider. Is this number sustainable? We'd like to know what the current growth rate is. Now, when you go from 38 to 245, that's a pretty good growth rate over 14 years, but no one would expect that would be a sustainable growth rate. You're going to get a high growth rate when a very young population, and then it's going to start falling off. Talking to researchers in Kentucky that have some females collared, They're going into the dens and checking on their cub survival, and they're not seeing cub survival that they'd like to see. Bears are losing cubs. They're not sure why, and they're going to continue to look at this. And 83% of our captures were on public land and not private. And I mentioned how that the bears aren't evenly distributed across the landscape, even within the study area. And then we also want to look at similar populations in other parts of the country. What's going on in those populations? How have they grown? Do they have hunting? Just kind of get some comparisons to help make better decisions. From a social aspect, we did not have any requests from the public for a hunt on the plateau this year. I think Darrell mentioned we had 3 bear requests, and they were all regarding our traditional bear area. We have done some surveys that I'll mention here again in just a moment that show a lot of public support for bear management all across the state of Tennessee. And then sometimes you're asked, well, a hunting season may help take care of some of your nuisance issues. Well, right now, the majority of our nuisance issues occurring up there are outside of the hunting season, so setting seasons to deal with nuisance issues would not be the answer to that as well. So where do we go from here? Chris mentioned a while ago the management plan. This management plan that we're working on is very comprehensive, and it has taken us quite a lot of time to complete, but our hope is that it will be well worth the time. Some of the things that we're going to be addressing specifically in our management plan regarding this population is establishing our goals and objectives for bears on the plateau. We need to talk about, look at public opinion and things like that and gather some more information. We also want to talk about our monitoring strategies. Right now, we use teeth to do that population reconstruction that Chris talked about. You get teeth from bears that are harvested. Well, we can't pull teeth right now, so we're looking at bait stations potentially and some other research. And then what would our harvest management be when we start hunting? And that goes all the way to public versus private lands. If you have bear reserves, the timing of your hunts, the number of days. And as part of that process, we do want to have some public meetings to kind of gauge the public's perception of bear hunting on the plateau. And the public opinions are very important to us, and we've been doing work already to gather some of this information. Last March, in 2011, 2012, we had Responsive Management do this bear research for us, this public opinion survey, and this was presented to the commission a little over a year ago. We also had 2 public meetings on the plateau that Region 3 hosted last spring. I believe Commissioner Bledsoe attended both of those, and those were interesting meetings because there were a lot more people for bears than against bears, and that was a little surprising based on some of the things that we'd been hearing. So we're already doing these public meetings. Chris mentioned our BearWise program. This is an education program that we've been working on and developing for about a year now, and we're in the very early stages of rolling this out. We have a lot of good partners that are joining in with the agency on this education program, with the Big South Fork on the plateau, and then the Tennessee State Parks and Forestry on the plateau. They're very, very interested in this education program and are being very supportive of it and helping us out with it. And I think this program is going to do really great things, not only in Tennessee, but in other states as well. Even Kentucky's asking about information regarding this program and whether or not they can use it. And then I'll finish with saying that, our goal as an agency is to make scientific-based decisions regarding the bears up here. And that's why we conducted this study. That's why we started it. And another thing that we've done to help move forward in that is we, as an agency, initiated the creation of this Cumberland Mountain Black Bear Working Group. And what we did is we went to these agencies that you can see here, TWRA, Kentucky Game and Fish, Big South Fork, Cumberland Gap National Historic Park, our Tennessee State Parks, Daniel Boone National Forest, UT, University of Kentucky, and really I should say Tennessee Department of Conservation, because folks with state natural areas are also involved in this. But what we want to do is take everybody up there that has a vested interest in these bears and kind of pool our resources and manage them as a whole to the best we can. And when I mean manage to the whole, people that we collect similar data. If Kentucky's doing bait stations and Big South Fork's doing bait stations and we're doing bait stations, then we should all be doing them the same way so we can use our data and pool it and compare it. And this isn't a new idea. This is something that was done in the 1970s with Tennessee, North Carolina, and Georgia in our Appalachian population. And the results of that working group were some really innovative ideas in bear management, and the bears responded positively. And I think we're going to see the same thing come out of this group. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Anybody from the commission?
Dan, I went on some of the DNA testing with some of the game wardens from Region 3 up there, and it's pretty interesting on how they done all that. And it's amazing how hard it is to find a single strand of hair on a piece of barbed wire in the woods, too.
Right.
But there is, around Big South Fork, there's several equine communities, and they're the ones that's having issues. I've not had any of them had any bird feeders and stuff like that's been destroyed. But I think it's more of an education and letting them know how to deal with them, because it's something new in that area.
Right.
And everybody wants to see one. They just don't want to see it on their back porch.
You're exactly right, and that's the reason that we're doing the BearWise program. And it's just, like I said, the people up there, I didn't, all summer had not a single person in Scott County say anything bad about the bears. They had a lot of questions. They were glad to see us up there, and they wanted information. And even in today's age, information can be very difficult to get out there and try to figure out where it's best directed. And that's why we're trying to pull in these other partners to help us do this, because what Big South Fork has a certain group of people they can hit. Pickett has a certain group of people. You can try working with the city of Oneida, working in their city park, and maybe put some things in. So, but we all want to present the same message as well and be consistent, and that's also another goal. But talking to the folks at Smoky Mountains National Park, they've had horses for years. They have never, ever, ever had any incident with bears and horseback riders. The only thing they've ever had is some issues with garbage that was left behind by horseback riders. So that's the kind of information that we need to get from the park and present to those folks to show that these issues can be avoided. And I will say, given the number of bears that are in Big South Fork, their number of complaints that they get from campers and things are minuscule from what you would expect. And that's a result of their efforts in their campgrounds and picnic areas to have all their trash and food picked up. So it does work. We just got to get that message out to people.
How far away do you think they are to have a limited season on the plateau?
I think realistically, Commissioner, that, if we went back and did this study again in 2014 to look at what kind of population growth we had in a 2-year period, I think minimum 3 years before we can step forward and say we're very comfortable that we can recommend this season and it will not be detrimental to the bear population. And in the grand scheme of things, that's a reasonable time frame. It gives us time to, work with Kentucky, work with Big South Fork, work with Daniel Boone, see if we can pool some resources for some good work, and then also collect some other data on our own and put all that together and analyze it and then make our decisions and move forward.
Any chance we meet that guy that climbed that dead tree and went down in to pull that bear out?
If that's who I think it is, he's probably in Arkansas now. And yeah, actually, I was there when they did that. He climbed up the tree, he shot the bear with a dart. Once she went down, he climbed down in the tree with her, bored a hole from the inside out so we could see where the top of the bear was, and they cut a hole in the tree with a chainsaw and pulled the bear and cubs out. So it was not an easy thing to do to get those bears, so. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Alan Peterson, discuss proclamation 13-03.
Thank you, Commissioners. Not that I think anybody cares, but I don't eat lunch. We've got two quick proclamations I'm going to present for Region 1, proclaiming a new WMA, and Kirk Miles is going to present one for Region 3, and I'll try to make it real brief, and I should be able to, because I talk a lot faster than Kirk. I don't know if Kirk can make his brief. We have a small little area in Region 1 that's been a miscellaneous land that's just open to hunting and fishing with the statewide seasons, called Parker Branch Wetland area. It's 283 acres in Gibson County on the Forked Deer River. We've started putting in some dove fields and had some other issues that we wanted to create some regulations that weren't allowed under just calling it a miscellaneous land of Tennessee, and so we're asking you to proclaim it a wildlife management area so we can include it with other regulations and require a WMA permit to hunt it to recoup some of the costs of dove field preparation. So I guess the appropriate step is for the committee to vote to recommend it or not to the full commission tomorrow, and then the entire commission vote to proclaim it as a WMA or not.
Do we vote, committee vote today?
The committee votes today, and then the full commission tomorrow. So TWA recommends proclaiming Parker Branch, and there's actually a small typo on here. It says recommend calling it Parker Branch Wetland. That's wrong. Parker Branch Wildlife Management Area. We'll fix that.
Quick question.
Yes.
In the regulations, we've listed all the WMAs. We'll be voting on those next month.
Right.
With affirmation of this, will we be able to get this into that list?
Yes, it'll be, once you proclaim this as a WMA, it will be included. And actually, we've got some recommendations that are probably already in there for the WMA regulations for Parker Branch. It'll be included. Okay, it may not be, but it will be in the proclamation for all the WMA rules and regulations, and it'll be in there. Yeah.
I would entertain a motion from the Wildlife Management Committee to approve proclamation 13-03. Okay, have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kirk Miles, Wildlife Manager, Region 3. He's a big Alabama fan.
Big Alabama fan.
I do hold that against him.
I understand. Maybe we want to not vote on this proclamation. I'm bringing forward to you Proclamation 1304. Actually, it's extremely similar to the proclamation Alan just went over, except this one is obviously in Region 3. It's a small area. We were handling it as a small miscellaneous WMA, open with statewide seasons. Darrell mentioned the bottom-up theory. This one is straight from the bottom up. The officer in Bledsoe County, where this one is located, it's on the Sequatchie Valley side of Walden's Ridge. Asked that we proclaim this. He's seeing more use and getting more questions about it, so we're ready to proclaim it as a WMA. And similar to Allen's, it will appear, we'll still have it pretty much open with statewide seasons, but it will appear in the WMA proclamation as well. So
Any
with that, I guess
questions?
TWRA recommends approval of Proclamation 1304, proclaiming Harp Wildlife Management Area.
there any discussion on this from the commission? Is there a motion?
Move approved.
Have a motion and a second. I'd like to vote on proclamation 13-04. All in favor? All opposed?
I have
Thank
a
you.
question I meant to ask Alan, but you brought it up. The Parker branch, will the hunting be same as statewide seasons like this one, or are you gonna reduce the hunting on it? Is that, I guess I wasn't paying attention if you said that.
The recommendation is, there's a couple of reasons why we want to recommend it. One, I said that we want to require a permit, which is not required on the WMAs, or the miscellaneous lands. It is on the WMAs, so we'll get some money back for the work we do. We're also going to recommend a couple of different changes that aren't open statewide seasons and bag limits. I think we're not gonna allow any quail hunting, because I think there might be one covey of quail on the place. And this place has a lot of dog training. I mean, constant, nonstop rabbit dogs all the time, and we're gonna try to limit some of that to take some pressure off. Jim, are there any other changes?
It'll be open with the WMA dog training, which is September through March.
Right,
But during turkey hunting, it'll be open statewide season.
yeah,
Statewide, waterfowl, statewide, everything.
right.